The sky looks loud. It looks crowded. It looks like it should be full of voices. But when we actually listen, it stays quiet. And that silence leads to one unnerving possibility. Maybe the universe is not empty. Maybe it is full of attempts, full of beginnings, full of civilizations that almost make it and then fail at the same step, again and again, until the galaxy becomes a museum of unfinished stories. If you like these calm, space-themed journeys into big questions, you can subscribe, and we'll drift together again on another quiet night. Now let's soften the world and step into the mystery that hides inside the silence. Imagine you are far from Earth, far enough that the planet is only a pale coin behind you. In front of you is the Milky Way, a river of faint light, billions of stars stacked into a glowing band. It looks endless. It looks alive. You hold out a receiver, a patient ear, and you wait for anything that sounds like intention. A pattern, a pulse, a whisper shaped by intelligence. And the receiver gives you only the universe's natural breathing. Static, cosmic noise. The soft, indifferent weather of space. This is where the great filter begins, not as a theory, but as a feeling. Because if the galaxy has so many stars, and so many planets, and so much time, then the quiet is not just curious, it is personal. It presses a question into the mind. Where is everyone? A gentle companion joins us, like a calm voice in a dark observatory. Archivist. When you say everyone, do you mean life, or do you mean civilization? That distinction is the whole story. Life might be common and still be quiet. A planet full of microbes does not build radio towers. A planet full of forests does not send probes. Even a planet full of intelligent animals might never leave its oceans. But civilization, the kind that changes a planet, builds machines, reaches outward, that kind of thing feels like it should leave traces. If it happens often enough and lasts long enough, the galaxy should look different. It should sound different. And yet, from where we sit, the universe does not look like a crowded city. It looks like a dark plain with a few scattered campfires. So, we arrive at our central question tonight. If civilizations are possible, why do we not see them everywhere? And if we do not see them, what does that imply about the path from lifeless rock to a star-faring society? The Great Filter is one answer. It suggests there is at least one step in that path that is so hard, so unlikely, or so deadly that almost no one passes it. Not some people, almost everyone. And the most haunting part is that we do not know where the filter sits. It might be behind us, meaning we are already the rare exception, a lucky world that slipped through. Or it might be ahead of us, meaning we are walking toward a cliff we cannot yet see. We'll plant a few promises early, and we'll return to them at the end. First, we keep. Returning to a simple image, a sieve held under a stream of possibility. Because the Great Filter is not a wall, it is a narrowing. Second, we keep returning to a small object, a drifting bottle in a cosmic ocean. Because every civilization that reaches outward becomes, in a way, a message. Third, we repeat a phrase, gentle but steady, so your sleepy mind can hold it. Most paths end in silence. Now we begin the long journey, and we keep it calm. Not a lecture, a story, a single thread pulling us forward. To understand the great filter, we first need to understand why anyone proposes it at all. We begin with a simple idea. The universe is old. Our galaxy is old. Stars have been burning for billions of years. Many stars have planets. We now know planets are not rare accidents. They are common outcomes of star formation. So it feels reasonable to imagine that life could have many chances. And if life has many chances, then over deep time, even rare events can happen. A step that occurs 1 in a million times can still occur many times if you roll the dice enough. So why do we not see the results? This is the core tension, sometimes called the Fermi paradox. And it is not really a paradox like a trick. It is a mismatch between what our intuition expects and what our sky seems to show. The great filter is a way to resolve that mismatch without insisting the universe is empty. It says, maybe the path is not simply many planets, therefore many civilizations. Maybe the path is many planets, then a brutal narrowing, then almost nothing. A sieve under a stream. Most paths end in silence. Archivist. What exactly counts as a step? That question sounds small, but it is enormous, because steps are how we place our fear. The steps might be biological, like the origin of life, or the rise of complex cells, or multicellularity, or intelligence. Or the steps might be social and technological, like developing industry, or surviving nuclear weapons, or stabilizing a planet's climate, or avoiding self-made catastrophe long enough to spread. The filter could be one step, or it could be a cluster of steps, a gauntlet where almost everyone falls somewhere along the way. But the great filter idea does not need us to know the exact step to be unsettling. It only needs one thing: the silence. Now we drift closer to that silence, and we try to hear what it implies. Imagine the galaxy as a coastline at night. Each civilization that becomes technological is like a lighthouse. It leaks light. It sends signals. It rearranges its environment in visible ways. Even if it does not intend to be seen, it tends to leave footprints. If the coastline has many lighthouses, the horizon should sparkle. But when we look, the horizon is mostly dark. So either lighthouses are very rare, or they do not last long, or they learn to hide perfectly, or we are misunderstanding what we should be looking for. There are several possibilities, and tonight we let them sit beside each other, without forcing a single conclusion. But the great filter is the one that carries the deepest weight, because it turns the silence into a warning. Now we need a calm mental model, something simple enough that you can carry it like a smooth stone. Think of the path to a spacefaring civilization as a long corridor with many doors. A planet must form in a stable way. It must have the right chemistry. Life must begin. Life must survive long enough. Complexity must arise. Intelligence must arise. Technology must arise. That technology must avoid self-destruction. It must persist for long periods. It must expand, or at least leave signs. Each door might be easy or hard. The great filter says at least one door is extremely hard, so hard that most never pass. So the question becomes, which door? And this is where the story becomes personal. because we are standing somewhere in that corridor. We are not guessing from the outside, we are inside the maze. Now we take our time and walk through the corridor together, door by door, softly. And we ask at each one, could this be where most stories end? The first door is the formation of habitable worlds. Planets are common, but habitability is not a single switch. It is a balance. Too close to the star, water evaporates. Too far, it freezes. Atmospheres matter. Magnetic fields might matter. Stability matters. Impacts matter. A planet can be habitable in theory and still be harsh in practice. So perhaps habitable planets are rare, but even if they are less common than planets overall, the galaxy is so big that rare might still mean many. So the first door alone does not fully satisfy the silence unless habitability is incredibly rare, far rarer than we currently think. We keep walking. The second door is the origin of life, abiogenesis. This is one of the biggest unknowns. We do not yet know how likely life is to emerge from chemistry. We have hypotheses, we have experiments. We have ideas about deep-sea vents, shallow ponds, catalytic surfaces, and self-replicating molecules. But we do not have a complete story, and we do not have a probability. It might be easy. It might be so hard that it almost never happens. If it is that hard, then the great filter could be behind us. We could be the lottery winner in a universe full of sterile worlds. That thought is comforting and lonely at the same time. Archivist. How do you tell if abiogenesis is rare? You look for life elsewhere. If we find life on Mars, or in the oceans under the ice of Europa or Enceladus, or in the atmosphere of an exoplanet, then life is probably not unimaginably rare. It might still be rare, but it would suggest the universe likes to make it when conditions allow. And if life is common, then the filter must be later. So the great filter becomes tied to the future of exploration. Every biosignature we find shifts where the fear goes. Most paths end in silence. We keep walking. The third door is the rise of complex cells. On Earth, life appears early, but complex cells appear much later. For a long time, Earth is dominated by single-celled life. And then, at some point, cells with internal structures become common, like eukaryotes. This step might be difficult. It might require rare events like symbiosis, where one cell becomes part of another in a stable partnership. If that is extremely rare, then the galaxy might be full of simple life that never becomes complex, never becomes large, never becomes intelligent. That would create a quiet universe filled with microbial oceans, a living silence. We keep walking. The fourth door is multicellularity. Even with complex cells, building bodies is not inevitable. Multicellularity requires cooperation, specialization, communication, and control. It requires systems that stop cells from defecting, from behaving selfishly, from becoming cancer. It requires a kind of internal civilization. If multicellularity is rare, then complex oceans might remain forever single-celled or limited to simple forms. We keep walking. The fifth door is intelligence. Not just nervous systems, but a particular kind of intelligence that builds tools, models, and technology. Earth has many intelligent creatures. Some use tools, some communicate in complex ways, but only one lineage builds radio telescopes. So perhaps technological intelligence is rare. Perhaps minds evolve often, but not the kind that turns into industry, science, and spaceflight. If that is the filter, then the universe might be full of animals, full of perception, full of experience but still quiet, a silent galaxy of watchers. We keep walking. The sixth door is technological civilization, the leap into high-energy control. This is the door that often feels like the most fragile, because it is where power outpaces wisdom. A species learns to manipulate energy at enormous scales. It learns chemistry, physics, engineering. It learns to rewrite its environment. It learns to build weapons that can end itself. It begins to change its planet's climate and ecosystems. It invents technologies that can spread quickly and unpredictably. This is where many people place the great filter, because it looks like a bottleneck we are currently squeezing through. But we do not want to panic. We want to understand. So we slow down and ask a gentler version of the same question. If a civilization becomes technological, what must it survive to last long enough to be seen? It must survive itself. And that can mean many things. It can mean avoiding nuclear war, or avoiding runaway climate damage, or avoiding engineered pandemics, or avoiding uncontrolled artificial systems, or avoiding ecological collapse, or avoiding social fragmentation so severe that long-term projects become impossible. It can mean managing the tension between short-term desires and long-term survival. It can mean not burning down your house while you are still learning how the wiring works. So perhaps the great filter is not one dramatic event, but a period, a dangerous adolescence. A civilization invents power, then must learn restraint. Many do not. Most paths end in silence. Archivist. If the filter is an adolescence, does that mean the galaxy is full of ruins? It could. Not ruins you can easily see, because time and geology erase many traces. But in principle, the galaxy could be full of worlds that briefly light up with industry and then go dark. They would be like fireflies, bright for a moment, then gone. And if most civilizations are brief, that alone could explain the silence. Even if they are common, their signals do not overlap in time for very long. You might have to be listening during the brief century when they are loud. Now we feel the sieve again, a river of potential worlds, narrowed by a dangerous passage. Most paths end in silence. Now we step back, because this story can feel like doom if we only look forward. The great filter has two faces, and the difference between them changes everything. If the filter is behind us, then we are rare and lucky. If the filter is ahead of us, then we are early in the story, and the hard part still waits. So how do we learn which face is true? We cannot, not yet, with certainty. But we can reason gently from evidence, and we can watch for future discoveries that tilt the balance. Here is one of the simplest ways to think about it. If we find that life is common, then early doors are easy, and the filter is likely later. If we find that complex life is common, then more doors are easy, and the filter is even later. If we find evidence of many technological civilizations, even old ones, then the filter might not exist in the way we fear. Or it might be somewhere else entirely. But right now, we do not have those discoveries. We have one example: Earth, a single data point. So tonight, we sit with uncertainty and we explore candidate filters, not to terrify ourselves, but to understand what kind of universe could produce the quiet we observe. Now we move into another movement, and we keep the narrative continuous by carrying one thought into the next. When you look at Earth's history, one of the strangest things is how long it takes for certain leaps to occur. Life appears relatively early, as far as we can tell, but complex life takes a long time. Intelligence takes a long time. Technological civilization appears only very late in Earth's timeline. That alone suggests that some steps might be hard. If a step were easy, perhaps it would happen quickly, repeatedly, in many lineages. But the fossil record and genetic evidence suggest a long chain of contingent events. So one interpretation is that Earth is not typical. We might have gotten lucky. But another interpretation is that Earth's timeline is typical for planets where life occurs, and that the hard step is simply time itself, the slow climb of complexity. Yet, time alone does not explain the silence if civilizations, once formed, spread and persist. A civilization that survives for 1,000,000 years should leave more traces than one that survives for 1,000. So the Great Filter, if it exists, might act strongly on longevity. It might not be hard to become technological. It might be hard to remain technological without collapsing. That is the dread-filled version, but we hold it gently. We do not need to believe it to learn from it. Now, let's give the Great Filter a soft, story-like shape. Imagine countless planets as seeds scattered across a cosmic field. Many seeds never sprout. Some sprout but die young. A few become plants. Fewer become trees. And among those trees, almost none survive storms, droughts, and fire long enough to become a forest that changes the landscape. The Great Filter is the storm that takes most trees before they become a forest. Most paths end in silence. Now, the archivist asks the question that always comes next, the one people whisper when they are alone. If the filter is ahead, what is the one step that wipes out almost every civilization? We do not know, but we can explore the candidates. And when we explore them, something interesting happens. The candidates are not only cosmic, they are human. They are familiar. They are the same risks that keep thoughtful people awake at night. So we move through them one by one, not as a list, but as a sequence of quiet scenes. One scene is war. A civilization develops powerful weapons and remains trapped in conflict long enough that one day, a decision, a mistake, or a cascade ends everything. This is an easy story to imagine because it matches our own history, but we must be careful. Civilization can survive war. Earth has survived many. So the filter, if it is war, would likely be something bigger than ordinary conflict. It would be conflict combined with planet-wide
technologies that can end a complex ecosystem permanently, or end a species permanently, or collapse the infrastructure that maintains high technology. Another scene is ecological overshoot. A civilization expands consumption faster than the planet can replenish. It erodes soils. It collapses fisheries. It burns through easily accessible energy. It destabilizes climate. It drives mass extinctions. it becomes fragile. Then a shock arrives, a drought, a crop failure, a financial collapse, a pandemic, a war, and the system snaps. Not necessarily to extinction. Collapse can mean losing the ability to maintain advanced technology, losing the capacity for long-term projects, losing the infrastructure that supports science and spaceflight. A planet can remain alive and inhabited, while the civilization falls back into a quieter state. In that scenario, the galaxy is full of worlds that briefly become loud and then become quiet again. Most paths end in silence. Another scene is runaway technology. A civilization invents systems that grow faster than governance, faster than ethics, faster than coordination. It could be biotechnology. It could be autonomous weapons. It could be artificial systems that pursue goals misaligned with survival. It could be something we have not imagined. The Great Filter might not be a familiar threat at all. It might be a category of mistake that becomes possible only when intelligence becomes powerful enough to change its own environment faster than it can understand the consequences. A young civilization might accidentally invent its own ending. A candle in a room full of dry paper. Most paths end in silence. Another scene is stagnation. This one sounds mild, but it can be deadly in a long timescale way. A civilization becomes comfortable, inward, risk-averse, or divided. It stops investing in science. It stops exploring. It becomes a patchwork of short-term choices. It never becomes a long-lived, outward signaling society. It does not die. It simply never becomes visible across the galaxy. It remains local, quiet, and eventually, perhaps, fades into history. In that scenario, the filter is not extinction. It is failure to expand and persist. Another scene is cosmic vulnerability. Even if a civilization does everything right, it lives in a universe with hazards. Asteroid impacts, supervolcanoes, nearby supernovae, stellar flares, long-term changes in its star. A civilization that does not spread beyond its planet is vulnerable. So perhaps the filter is the step of becoming multiplanetary before a natural catastrophe arrives. But here's the twist. If becoming multiplanetary is itself hard and risky, then many might fail before they spread. So the filter might be in the transition from planetary to interplanetary life, from one basket to many. Most paths end in silence. Now, we take a calm breath because this can feel heavy, and we remember something important. The Great Filter is a hypothesis, not a sentence. It is a way to interpret a mystery. The universe is quiet, therefore something is hard. But the universe can be quiet for other reasons too. Civilizations might be rare because life is rare. They might be rare because intelligence is rare. They might hide. They might communicate differently. They might live in ways that do not broadcast. So we do not cling to the filter as destiny. We hold it as a question. And then we ask, what would it mean if the filter is behind us? This is the gentler face. If the hardest step is behind us, then we are precious in a different way. We are not doomed. We are rare. We are the unlikely branch that does not break. In that case, the silence is not a warning about our future. It is a testament to how strange and lucky our past is. It might mean the origin of life is extraordinarily unlikely, or it might mean complex cells are extraordinarily unlikely, or It might mean intelligence that builds technology is extraordinarily unlikely. Or it might mean the combination is unlikely. If that is true, then the universe could be full of empty worlds and simple life, but very few technological civilizations. That is both comforting and lonely. Now, if the filter is ahead, then we are not rare because of our past. We are rare because almost no one survives the next part. That is the harsher face, and it leads to a quiet, practical question. If the filter is ahead, can we see it coming? Maybe, maybe not. But we can identify the kinds of risk that could act as filters, and we can build resilience against them. We can treat the great filter as an invitation to maturity. Now, we move into the most important pivot of the entire journey, the moment where the great filter stops being a cosmic story and becomes a human one. The great filter is not only about other civilizations, it is also about us. It asks whether intelligence, once it becomes powerful, tends to destroy itself or transcend itself. Do minds mature fast enough to handle the power they create? Archivist. Is the great filter basically a test of wisdom? In its most haunting interpretation, yes. It is a test of coordination, restraint, and long-term thinking. It is a test of whether a civilization can build systems that keep dangerous technologies from being used recklessly while still allowing progress. It is a test of whether a civilization can care about the future as if it is real, even when the future is invisible. This is one reason the great filter sticks in the mind. It is not abstract. It is intimate. It resembles the challenges we already face, just stretched onto a galactic canvas. Most paths end in silence. Now, to keep the story moving, we ask another question that naturally follows. If the great filter wipes out almost every civilization, why do we not see evidence of their past existence? In other words, where are the ruins? This is where we need to remember how hard it is to see things across interstellar distances and how quickly time erases traces. A civilization might leave artifacts in its own system, but those artifacts may be small compared to astronomical scales. It might build structures that are visible, but perhaps it does not. It might change its atmosphere, but that might fade. Also, a civilization might not spread widely. It might remain confined, and if it collapses, it might leave very little that is detectable from light years away. So the absence of ruins does not prove the absence of past attempts. It only tells us that if ruins exist, they are not obvious to our current searches. Now we drift into a calmer scientific question. What kinds of evidence could reveal whether civilizations exist or have existed? One category is biosignatures, signs of life in planetary atmospheres, like chemical combinations that are hard to maintain without biology. Another category is technosignatures, signs of technology, like unusual atmospheric pollutants, artificial illumination, structured radio emissions, or large-scale engineering. If we begin to find biosignatures frequently, that suggests early steps are easy, and the filter is later. If we find technosignatures frequently, then the silence is not real, and the great filter becomes less urgent in the classic sense. If we find biosignatures but no technosignatures, that suggests life is common, but technological civilization is rare or short-lived, which is exactly the kind of pattern the great filter predicts. So future observations could shift the entire emotional weight of the theory. Most paths end in silence. Now, let's create a gentle micro-hook. Imagine, someday, we detect a clear biosignature on a nearby exoplanet, a strong sign of living chemistry. But we see no signs of technology. The universe would suddenly feel more alive and more empty at the same time. Alive, because life is not unique to Earth. Empty, because the step from life to lasting civilization might be the rare step, the filter. That single discovery could move the filter forward in the corridor, closer to us. Archivist. And if we find complex life, like a planet with oxygen, and seasons and biological rhythms, then more doors are likely easy, and the filter moves even later. That is why the Great Filter is not just a late-night thought experiment. It is tied to real astronomy, to telescopes, to spectra, to patient surveys of distant atmospheres. The universe might answer, slowly, in chemistry. Now, we move into another movement that keeps the narrative flowing, because a sleepy story needs momentum without noise. We ask, why would a filter exist at all? Why would the universe be so good at making stars and planets, and so bad at making civilizations that last? One answer is that intelligence is not the natural endpoint of evolution. Evolution selects for survival and reproduction in local environments, not for cosmic expansion. A species can thrive for millions of years without technology. Technology might be a rare fluke, a side effect of certain pressures, like manipulating the environment, using tools, social learning, and language. And even if technology arises, it might be self-limiting. The very traits that drive technological progress, curiosity, ambition, competition, can also drive instability. So the filter might not be an external trap. It might be a pattern that emerges from the nature of intelligence under constraints. Most paths end in silence. Now, we let the story become more intimate again. Imagine a young civilization, somewhere far away, under a different star. They invent fire, they invent writing, they invent machines. They begin to feel unstoppable. At first, every advance feels like liberation. More comfort, more power, more control. Then the advances become dangerous. The tools become double-edged. The civilization reaches a threshold where a small group, or even a single mistake, can cause enormous harm. At that moment, the civilization must change its relationship with itself. It must build trust, coordination, and long-term governance faster than it builds destructive power. If it succeeds, it passes the filter. If it fails, it becomes a brief flicker. The galaxy over time becomes dominated by the survivors, which may be rare. That could explain the silence. Now we can feel the sieve again, a stream of civilizations narrowed by adolescence. Most paths end in silence. Archivist. If survivors are rare, what would survivors look like? They might look quiet. They might be careful about broadcasting. They might be efficient, reducing waste heat and obvious signatures. They might be distributed. They might use private communication. They might avoid flashy megastructures. They might blend into the background. In other words, the very civilizations that survive might be the hardest to detect. That is a subtle twist. The Great Filter says most fail, but even among those who pass, some might choose invisibility or quietness, which would make the universe seem even quieter than it truly is. So the filter might not be the whole explanation. It could be part of a larger pattern. Now, we should address something that often confuses people, and doing so will keep the story clean. The Great Filter is not necessarily one step in the literal sense. People like the phrase because it is dramatic, but the underlying idea can be broader. It can be any feature of the universe or of intelligence that makes visible civilizations rare. Still, the title tonight is The One Step That Wipes Out Almost Every Civilization. So we treat it like a focal point, a single bottleneck that does most of the thinning. What could that single step be? A strong candidate is the transition from planetary civilization to a robust, multiplanetary, self-sustaining presence. Because until you can survive off-world, you are vulnerable to your planet and to yourself. You are vulnerable to asteroid impacts, supervolcanoes, climate runaway, wars, mistakes. A civilization that spreads to multiple habitats becomes harder to erase completely. It becomes redundant, like life itself, like a species that lives in many ecosystems, not just one. So perhaps the one step is leaving the cradle in a serious way, building independence beyond your home planet before disaster arrives. If that step is extremely hard, then almost everyone stays confined, and confined civilizations are fragile. Many collapse or die before they spread. That would wipe out almost everyone, not necessarily by cosmic malice, but by bottleneck timing. Most paths end in silence. Archivist. But is space expansion really necessary to be visible? Not strictly. A civilization could be visible without colonizing. It could broadcast. It could build powerful beacons. It could alter its atmosphere in detectable ways. It could build large structures. But visibility over cosmic time often correlates with longevity, and longevity correlates with resilience, and resilience often correlates with redundancy. So the step of becoming durable, not just advanced, might be the real filter. Durability is not glamorous. It is maintenance. It is stable institutions. It is long-term thinking. It is not collapsing under your own complexity. And that might be the rarest achievement of all. Now, we take another calm breath, because this is where the great filter becomes almost a bedtime lesson, not because it is simple, but because it points to a gentle truth. Survival is harder than invention. It is easier to make a powerful tool than to make a wise society that uses it safely. So if the universe is full of inventors, but short on survivors, the sky stays quiet. Most paths end in silence. Now, let's bring in the bottle again, our drifting bottle in the cosmic ocean. Any civilization that reaches a certain level becomes a message, even unintentionally. It leaks signals. It leaves chemical fingerprints. It puts heat into space. It rearranges matter. If the galaxy is full of such bottles, the ocean should be full of them. We should see them. But perhaps most bottles never make it far. They break in storms. They sink. They disappear. Only a few drift long enough to reach other shores. The great filter is the storm that breaks most bottles before they travel. Now, we shift into the final third of our journey, where the story begins to fold back toward the opening, paying off the promises and returning to the silence with new meaning. We have walked through candidate filters behind us and ahead of us. We have felt the corridor. We have felt the sieve. Now we ask the most direct question we can ask, quietly, without drama. Which possibility should we hope is true? This is the uncomfortable part, because our hope depends on what kind of discovery we make. If we hope the filter is behind us, we are hoping that life or intelligence is extremely rare, meaning we are alone or nearly alone, but also meaning we are not doomed by a predictable future bottleneck. If we hope the filter is ahead of us, we are hoping that life is common and intelligence is common. But then we must accept that most civilizations die at the same step, and we might be approaching it too. Most people instinctively hope the filter is behind us because it feels safer. But there is a moral weight to that hope because it implies loneliness on a cosmic scale. It implies a universe where our responsibility is enormous. If we are rare, then preserving and spreading life might be one of the most important things that can happen in the observable universe. If we are not rare, then surviving our adolescence might be one of the most important things we can do for ourselves. Either way, the great filter turns into responsibility. Most paths end in silence. So, no matter where the filter is, the lesson is the same. It points toward care. Care for our planet. Care for our future. Care for what we build. Because if the filter is ahead, care helps us avoid it. And if the filter is behind, care helps us honor the rarity we represent. Now, we add one more gentle layer. Even if a civilization passes the filter, it might not expand forever. It might choose stillness. It might find meaning locally. It might become quiet for reasons other than fear. So the silence could still persist even if survivors exist. That means the great filter might not be the only story, but it remains one of the most clarifying stories, because it explains why the sky is not crowded with obvious, old, galaxy-spanning civilizations. Now, we let the narrative keep flowing by imagining the future discoveries that could shift our understanding. Imagine we detect a strong biosignature on multiple planets, but we never detect technosignatures. The filter moves forward. Imagine we detect technosignatures, even one, a clear artificial signal or structure. The silence breaks, and the great filter becomes less absolute. It might still exist, but it might not wipe out almost everyone. Imagine we find evidence of past industry on Mars or on a moon. Not proof of aliens, but proof that a technological lineage can exist and vanish, even in one system. The great filter becomes a local lesson, not a distant hypothesis. Each discovery is like moving a lamp along the corridor, revealing which doors are open and which are locked. And until those discoveries arrive, we live in uncertainty. Most paths end in silence. Now, we slow down and begin to land the ending. But we do it gently, without slamming the brakes. The great filter, at its core, is a way to interpret a quiet sky. It says, the universe is full of chances, but not full of outcomes. It says, the path from rock to radio is not a smooth slope. It is a cliff face, with at least one near impossible ledge. It says, either we have already climbed the hardest ledge, or we have not reached it yet. And it leaves us with one lingering, bedtime-like image. A sieve held under a stream of starlight. Most paths end in silence. Now we pay off the promises. We promised the sieve, and now we can feel what it means. The universe might not prevent life. It might not prevent intelligence. But it might narrow the outcomes so brutally that only a few civilizations ever become long-lived and visible. We promised the bottle, and now we see it in a new way. Every civilization is a message, but most messages never cross the ocean. We promised the phrase, and here it is one last time, soft and steady, not as despair, but as perspective. Most paths end in silence. And now, the last question is the quietest one. What do we do with this? We do not treat it as prophecy. We treat it as a mirror. We become a civilization that tries to pass whatever filters exist by becoming stable, careful, resilient, and wise with the power we create. We learn to play the long game. If you'd like more gentle journeys through space mysteries and cosmic questions, you can like and subscribe, and we'll drift together again soon. And somewhere in the galaxy, a young world lights up for a brief moment, sends its first bright signal into the dark, and then, if the great filter is real, the signal fades, and the sky becomes quiet again.